Hey, I'm Jeremy and welcome back to Blender for Designers. I am wearing reflective sunglasses because today I'm going to be talking about environment maps, which help it determine reflections. And to help me here, I'm going to bring up Suzanne, the monkey mascot slash test object for Blender. And because she has an environment map applied to her, she should have the same reflections that I have in my sunglasses. An example. Here's the can I made back in my third video, and it's lit with nothing but an environment map. Now let's take the environment map away. The environment is entirely just one color. And as you can see, it doesn't look metallic at all because it's not reflecting anything. Let's look at some different ones. This is the room I'm recording this in. Now here's the Brooklyn Bridge, the Javits Center, and St. Peter's in the Vatican. Now I'll show you a 3D city, basic 3D lighting, and a 3D room rendered. Environment maps, they're called many things, and including HDRs sometimes, spherical maps, spherical projections, 360 images, bunch of stuff. But they're really important for 3D. And in fact, actually one of the reasons I got into 3D as like a real way to amplify my designs is because of environment maps. I realized that they could really make things look really good without a whole lot of stuff in them. And they're particularly critical for metallics and glossy stuff because in order for you to see that something is metallic or glossy, you need to see it reflect something. And the environment map can be that something. So let me show you what they are. I'm going to go here into the screen here, and I have an environment map. You may have seen this in one of my earlier videos. It's just something I downloaded from Google that apparently you can use without restrictions, because under Creative Commons. I have a bunch of others that I've paid for, like these ones from Video Copilot's Element 3D series, and a couple others here, mostly from Video Copilot. Oh, this was one I shot myself. One thing, this is actually one that I used in Mockup 3D. So one thing you'll see about these is they're kind of weirdly distorted, and they are, well, you probably didn't see this right away, but they're kind of a rectangular. They're specifically a 2:1 ratio. And I'm going to kind of explain to you what they are, but let me first go into Blender here. You can see I have a scene loaded up here, and it's got the box I had from the box opening tutorial, and the can I had from the second tutorial I did, and then just another Suzanne. So I'm going to hit Shift-Z to go into rendered mode, and it looks like crap. You can see something. It looks like crap, though, because I have the world lighting, but the world is only just doing a single color. So, you know, you can go up and down, but it doesn't really show you all that much. And you do get a little bit of reflection because these things reflect off each other. But to really make this sing, we need to put an environment in there. And let me get my face out of the way so we can see this a little bit better. So to get an environment map in Blender, you have to create an environment texture. So I'm going to split the view here. Actually, I want it to go the other direction. And I want to have this be a node editor. And then to get into environment, you have to, it's kind of a type of material, but not really. So you go into materials, and this is one of my material settings, but then you got to hit this little globe here for world. And then you hit use nodes. And now nothing's happening because there's no output. And usually there would be something automatically, but I deleted this for the sake of the tutorial. So you need an output, world output, and then you're going to need, I'm going to zoom in here so you can see what we're doing. And then we're going to need a shader, a background shader. All right, so now this should basically be like we just did before. So this is just literally color going into a world. And so this usually should automatically be up there. Again, I just deleted one that I already had. But to get environment map on there, let's zoom in here so we can see these objects. You have to add a texture. And this is specifically, you can't add an image texture. It has to be an environment texture. So don't add an image texture, add an environment texture. And then you hit open. And then we're going to go up, and we're going to my Enva maps. And let me go pick this one. This is actually the texture that I used for Mockup 3D. Shout out to my new project. So I'm plugging that in, and it's not doing actually all that much, to be honest. Partly because it's pretty light. But you can start to see, one of the things that's nice is you can be able to isolate. Like if we isolated this, like let's just take this only, or just move that, move even Suzanne on another layer. So we only have this guy. And the problem is, like, if we didn't have the environment map in there, you're not reflecting anything. So having that in there really helps. And even if you don't have, even if we can go transparent here. Where is, oh, right, here we go, transparent. So we don't see any of the background, but even then, you can see, like, this does not look metallic, whereas this does, because it has something to reflect. Obviously, look, I can make it look a little bit more metallic if we give that something to reflect, but it really just helps to have an environment map, and then we can have the psych and a whole bunch of other fun stuff in there too. And we can bring Suzanne back here. So yeah, so that's the why of the environment map. So now we got this in there, but we may want to like rotate it around and do stuff with it. So this is totally non-intuitive. So let me show you. You have to use a mapping node and a input node. So let me show you. First of all, you need an input node. So you go to input, and it's going to be geometry, and then you're going to have. And I'm hitting Shift A to bring up this menu. It's also, you can do it right here as well. So Shift A, and then you're going to do a vector mapping. And then you're going to go, actually, I totally messed that up. See, this is not intuitive at all. Use texture coordinate. Yes, it's texture coordinate. Yes, it's texture coordinate. Input texture coordinates. I remember what it looks like, because what you have to get is you have to get generated. And then you go into vector. All right, so now you can move this around, and usually you move it around. Probably the best way is to move it around in Z. And again, I'm maybe just gonna isolate this layer again, so we can kind of see what that means. So let's just go back to my camera for a sec. So moving it in Z, it kind of rotates the background there, so it changes what's actually being reflected. So you can see these little lines are kind of moving around a bit. I actually kept this pretty even, but let's try it with another. Let's try it with another environment map here. Let's go into. Let's do something with a little bit more variety. Okay, here's one. Here's one. Here's a studio version. And so now you see it's a very different look. And it rotates, by rotating, I can really change the way this looks. And I can rotate in Y, I can rotate in X. And what you're doing is basically, let me turn off transparent here so we can kind of see what this does. And let me just go out of let's go back out of orthographic mode. And see what you have is basically this entire image surrounding the can and creating reflections on it. And for this one, actually, this is probably a good one. I don't actually really like this environment map terribly much, but it'll show you kind of one thing that you can do, which is you can first of all increase the strength, and then you can also do stuff like put curves between there, so you can bring up the value here to kind of make it look a little bit better, especially if you again are if you're going transparent, you probably want to bring up the value a little bit. So okay, let's bring everything back again, and let's go back to my original environment map. Okay, let's darken that a bit. Well, actually, I kind of like it light, so let's just take it up. Let's go back to the camera. Yeah, you hit 0 to hit the camera, and then so another thing I was one of the things I said made me shine, and that's the reason I did that, is because this is actually a metallic, and the environment maps are particularly critical for that, because you really want to see, on a round surface you can often see a lot of little intricacies, but on a flat surface, to see that is metallic, you really have to get in there and make it look really good. So I'm actually going to drop the psych just so we can see it a little bit better. And if we go to slightly different angle, you can kind of see, yeah, you can see you have to show a reflection to show metallicness, and you can see it kind of at this angle. but you don't really see it. You didn't really see it from here, and you'll have to, you know, sometimes you can increase the contrast a little bit, which kind of helps, and you can change the camera angle. One of the things I can do is I can go into the armature and I can rotate this in Z, so we can kind of see, yeah, we can start to see, yeah, I can start to see, you know, rotate this to kind of make something reflect in there. And then obviously this is reflecting on, you know, on the various things, but you can see I isolate it, and now I rotate it in Z, and I'm able to, like, you know, you want to just get the angle just right. And if you want, sorry, I am rotating this all around the world. So there we go. So you can see I'm rotating this angle in here to kind of get those to work. You know, now it looks a little bit more metallic. And then if I don't want to do, you know, if I want to keep the angle as it was before, you know, let's bring it back a little bit here. You know, you probably want to rotate the environment. And what I'm actually going to want to do here is the cyc is actually really, really large, and that's kind of, it's kind of kicking back. There's some reflections going on here that's kind of ruining that. So I'm going to actually go ahead into 3D view here, and I'm going to go on the top. I'm not going to be, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit this cyc. And I'm going to bring this in so we're not reflecting quite. Yeah, there we go. So you can see it's very important. You know, again, it's the objects as well as, you know, as well as the objects, as well as the environment map itself. They can really determine what these reflections look like. And, you know, of course we could, you know, split this, you know, so we want to go as far as we can, and then we can split this. And go over here, and then we got these four. And we got these four. Sorry, I was gonna bring in this corner so we can, you know, we can just, you know, get a nice little reflection there. And of course we can move the camera down and do a bunch of other stuff, but, you know, to be able to show off the metallicness is really critical that you have things in there to reflect. So that's kind of, and then, you know, let's look at a couple others, you know, now that we got, you know, that we got things, you know, we kind of got things the way we sort of like them, but let's you know, but, you know, let's take a look at some others. So let's, you know, see some kind of different looks here. So so I'm gonna go into my node editor again, and then let's close this and open another one. And so yeah, I mean, this is a totally different look. This is actually one that I shot in my father's garden, and it's going to be way too dark, so I'm going to kind of increase the lightness. But you can see it really changes the way this thing, and you can see it actually reflects quite a bit more. I'm gonna reset this, and maybe just rotate the X list a little bit. Yeah, because we kind of got a reflection there. Now with the cyc. Now we can bring the cyc kind of back a little bit, back to normal. No, maybe not. No, I kind of like having a little reflection off there. But I know you got a weird thing, but you can deal with that later. But yeah, we can actually get rid of the cyc and see what that looks like. So yeah, you can see now I'm in my dad's garden, kind of showing off how it reflects all the greenery on the can, and you can really see the metallics there, and you can even see, ooh, that got messed up. That's fun. That's because of the armature. Don't worry about it. So yeah, you can see kind of how it's reflecting the whole scene. So let's try another one. Let's go back to let's go back to the node editor, and let's try another one. And again, I'm taking out the cyc because it's reflecting too much on its own. Oh, here's a fun one. This is you know, one of the ones from Video Copilot, and you can see this kind of creates some really great reflections. And then, you know, even if I do bring back the cyc, you know, you can really see some kind of really interesting kind of things coming off, particularly off of the text there. So yeah, you know, each image is going to have a different kind of look for it. And, you know, depending on the angle, like this is a better angle for it. And then maybe, you know, but maybe I could rotate it in Z. So, you know, changing that angle a little bit. So yeah, so that's kind of how you know, again, I have no lights in here except the environment map. And that's all I'm kind of using. So this is kind of how you can try different things with different environment maps. So now I'm going to explain what an environment map actually is. And to do that, I have a brand new Blender file with a sphere in there. So essentially, an environment map is wrapped around the inside of a sphere. And we know how to do this in Blender, so let me show you. So we're going to go into our sphere, and then I'm going to go 1 for front view, Control 1 for rear view. I'm going to hit A to unselect everything. I'm going to do a loop cut here, and then I'm going to bring up my T and bring up my UV image editor, and then I'm going to mark a seam. So we're going to unwrap the sphere. And then I'm gonna, you see I'm already shift spaced in to show you this, but I'm gonna go into the UV image editor here. And so this is where we're gonna unwrap our UVs. I'm gonna go back to the front view, select everything. But actually I'm gonna bring up an image here, and you're gonna see what kind of image in a sec. It's the world. And as you may imagine, wrapping the world onto a sphere is a problem that's been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So then this is a spherical projection that we're going to do. And this NASA will give you these images. If you go to, actually I'm going to go to the site right now. It's called the Blue Marble. Just Google Blue Marble NASA. There's these great images. They're super high res. They're totally free to use for anything. Our taxes pay for it. Happy to pay for it. Great use of my taxes. So you can use these to, you know, to create the world, which we're not doing now, but we're going to show you how to do it. So we're going to wrap that onto here. So we're going to go to unwrap, and then we're going to go do a sphere projection. And that's it. That's how you project onto a sphere. So I'm going to, you won't be able to see it yet, but let me put a material on this sphere. So let me just get rid of these shells for a sec. And then we're going to go to our materials, and I already did this once, so I have a sphere project material already. And then if we go to texture, we can see the world. Great. So you can see that's how we project an image onto a sphere, but that's not much like a spherical map. What a spherical map is actually the inverse. It is the image projected on the inside. So to see that, we're going to scale the hell up out of the sphere. Whee! And now we can see the inside. Of course, we're seeing the grid floor and everything as well. So let me go to render mode so we can really see this. And there's a little, the material is actually cheated a little bit here. Let me go to the node editor here so you can actually see the material. You actually see, that's the background. You see this is an emission material. So it's generating its own light, and you can kind of see the inside of the globe, but it's inverted. So let me just hide the sphere for a sec. And let's get the same image spherically projected. So it's the same image here in environment texture, spherically projected here. So you can see it's basically the same thing. You're kind of looking at the inside of a globe. So let's go ahead and look at North America here. And then we're going to bring our sphere back, and we're not in the right spot. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into our sphere material, and then we have to invert it to get to the right spot. So we're kind of looking at Alaska right now. So what we're going to do is I actually use the same thing we did with the environment texture. You can actually use a mapping node, but instead of using generated, use the UV coordinates. And then you can see what I did is the rotation doesn't really make that much difference, and only X and Y make a difference in the UV. But so I changed the location, and I inverted the scale here. So this should be, if my testing was correct, probably not exactly right, but so we're going to let me just scale the sphere up a lot. So we're looking at Europe right now. So let's see if we can't rotate an X a little bit so we can go around to maybe North America here. Yeah, there we go. We're in North America. So we're kind of looking, again, it's not exactly the same, but you can kind of see that the inside of the sphere, which is all this is the inside of the sphere, is basically the same as an environment map. So now, a quick word about HDR and resolution. You sometimes hear these things referred to as HDRs, and people often use HDR for them. You don't need to, always. Let me explain what HDR is. HDR is high dynamic range, and that means that there's a huge difference between the brights and the darks. So, like for example, I have this one. This is actually a dot HDR, and you can see there's a sun in here. So you want to make sure that the sun is red is really much brighter. If that's all you're lighting with, you want to make sure it's really much brighter than the shadows here. So you want to really make sure that you're you're using more than the typical image, using a high dynamic range image. But you don't always need one. For example, if you have a light already there and you don't need it for lighting, you probably don't need an HDR. If you have, say, an overcast day, an evenly lit room, something low contrast scene, HDR is not going to benefit you at all. Don't even bother. So if you're using your own lighting, you probably don't need it. Also, resolution. Some of these things come pretty big. Most of these here are around 2K. This one's probably an exception because I just generated it from a 360 camera, which I'll get to in a minute. But the thing is, I wouldn't go any higher than 2K if all you're using it for is reflections. Particularly if your reflections aren't sharp. If you have blurry reflections, you probably barely need 1K. Because you're just not going to get that kind of detail in your reflections. Now, if you're going to have the HDR as part of the scene, like if you're going to actually show the background, show this in the background, then you may want a higher resolution. Because the thing about these is you're only going to use like a small part of it in the image, so you want a high res. And the other thing is, you see at the poles, you often get a lot of distortion. Like you can actually see, if we go back to this UV, you can see the poles do not work all that well. This is for the sphere, but basically, as I said, an HDR is an inverted sphere. So, if you're using it as a background, be careful. You want to use high res, and you want to be careful around the poles. But if you're not using it as a background, which I pretty much do not, you're fine with 2K. So, quick word about that. Now you're probably wondering, can you make your own? And the answer is yes, now more than ever. Now let me explain to you what people used to do. What they used to do in VFX, particularly they did this on like VFX on movies, is they'd use these mirror balls. And then they'd take these mirror images and they'd use math and create, they'd have to actually do two spheres, do it in both sides and then figure out what the whole set or whatever looked like. Much, much easier today. Some of you probably know this. I'm going to actually bring up, there's apps on your phone. I'm going to go ahead and bring up the phone here so you guys can play along with me as I go onto my phone. So we're going to go into my phone here. And there's one here, there's just that I've called 360 that I've used a bunch. I honestly, I've not really compared them. This is just the one I happen to have downloaded years ago. So you can go ahead and let me show you. You basically do it as a series of images. Like this is the screen. That's me, and I can just start. It'll start just recording this and then kind of pasting it together. So I'm not going to do the whole thing, but you can go. I'm going to go to my library here. That's not very good, but this is one I did in Javits Center, and that's actually not too bad. But you kind of see around some of the edges, it doesn't look great. Like you can see on the floor got all messed up, and it just uses a computer to paste it together, so it doesn't really work all that well. But it works fine. I mean, I've done, I've actually, I do this for vacation photos a lot, and like I've done, like that was in Javits nearby. I've done. Oh, here's a great one. This is in the Galleria Borghese outside of Rome. As I said, I do vacation photos for this. So, and you can use that for I see if I can use that for 3D. The other way you can do it, if you're doing photographically, is using one of these, which is a 360 camera. And this is these have gotten really cheap because VR has become so in, and people use these for VR. So I picked this up for like 120 or something. It's not great. It has a big scratch on it now, but I'm going to use it later. I will show you. It actually works well enough for 3D reflections. And the third way you can do it is to use Blender. So here's a Blender file for creating an environment map, and this is actually one I used for Mockup 360. So there's a lot going on here because this is the actual file. So I just have, basically I've kind of constructed this room with a bunch of stuff that kind of creates interesting reflections. And if you go here, you can see, or it's a 360 camera. It actually, there's a camera in the middle here. It's creating a 360 image. So how do you set that up? So you go over here, you got to go into your camera, and then you just set it as a panoramic camera. And an equirectangular panoramic. And I think you have to do, like, you just look at these settings. And the other thing you have to do is, since, as I said, a environment map is a 2:1 image, so you have to make sure this is 2048 by 1024 or whatever it is. It's twice as long as it is tall. So you have to change the dimensions here in render to make that work. So that's, and then, you know, just set up a scene with materials and whatever. And that's literally it. Can you do video? Yes. Now that actually came from a 360 video that I took off of Sarah Dishi's channel, and I cut it down, brought it into Blender, and used that as the environment map. Here's what they look like side by side. And now, let's bring it all together and do an environment map right here, and put Suzanne right there. So right here I have a little stand with my little 360 cam right next to me where it's supposed to be. And we'll get some of my head in the way. And you can do this a number of ways, but I'm going to control it with a phone. So I'm going to bring my phone up. My phone is right here, but I'm going to have you guys play along as well, so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to go to their app. I've already connected the camera. And you can see this is what the camera is seeing. There's actually two lenses here. Let me see if I can go back. So you can see there's two lenses here. There's a front lens and a back lens. And this is the front lens. You can see it's seeing the screen right in front of me with a bunch of crap on it, and yeah, and like my room. And then if I show, this is the other lens. Yeah, something. That's the front, that's the back, whatever. There's the other lens back there, and it uses it. It's going to figure out the whole thing. So this is actually in the 360 mode up here. Unfortunately, kind of up there. So yeah, so what I'm going to do, you can do photo and video. So I'm going to do a photo. There we go. And then we're going to use manual controls here to do kind of an HDR. So we're going to leave that look. I kind of like the slightly warmer look. So, and we can always change it actually in Blender. So I'm going to, well, let me just do this again. We're going to do a mid-range shot. And then I kind of want to get, you kind of see up here somewhere, you see my lamp, and I kind of want to get some HDRing in there. So I'm going to go to exposure, and I'm going to drop it way down. Right, that's way up. Well, we might as well do that too. Let me go to exposure and drop it way down. Way down. There we go. So, okay, cool. So we're going to shoot that. All right, so let's see what that looks like. All right, so here you have the regular exposure, the really bright exposure, and the really dark exposure. So we're going to combine them and create an HDR from them. So we're going to do that in Photoshop. And the menu's way over here so you can't see it. But you go to Automate, Merge to HDR Pro. So again, I've only done this a few times in Photoshop, so I don't know all the details about this. You can see I moved, so I'm a little bit blurry. So made some minor adjustments here in Photoshop, trying to compensate for some of the weird haloing effect and stuff. But I'm going to speed through this because this isn't a Photoshop tutorial, and yeah. So anyway, I ended up doing all these adjustments and saving a PNG out. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and open Blender. Okay, so I'm going to go to the very front. Okay, so as a background image, I'm going to go ahead and import the very first clip of this video, or the very near the first clip of the video. And that's going to go only on camera. Great. And then I want to add a Suzanne here. So we'll Shift A, add, mesh, monkey. Okay, let's bring her right above where I need her. Split the view here. Let's add a node editor. Let's add a material for Suzanne first of all. And let's make it a principled shader. And then let's add the environment texture. So we're gonna use nodes, environment texture, open it. Let's open that big ass HDR. Okay, let's move that down. And then I'm almost certain we're gonna need some adjustments here, so I'm gonna leave some room. And I might even want to rotate it, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Let's see what the render looks like. So I'm basically going to speed through the rest of it here. Did a lot of little tweaking, a lot of, just changing the materials, changing the environment, changing the colors. The big deal actually was to position the environment right, because I wanted to make sure she was in the same position. You probably see that coming up a bit here. And that she was in the same position she would be, if she was in the actual room, because sometimes the environment map isn't rotated correctly. But yeah, and then I tweaked the colors. I did one render, and then I did another. So that's pretty much it. And here we got the final render that I outputted. Remember, you only have to take a little bit. She looks very gold, which is good. I want her to look gold, kind of like my sunglasses. So that's about it. Isn't that right, Suzanne? Hope you guys learned a lot about environment maps. I think they're really critical, really important for good 3D. So yeah, so thank you. And if you haven't yet, take a look at mockup3d.com. Still working on it, having, lots of development on it. Got some cool new features going. So yeah, you still got that working, but then I can kind of go in here and you got some cool new stuff with layers. You got some, what do you call them? Keyboard shortcuts. You can actually go in there and just drag this in and replace a layer. And then, so yeah, and then you can just drag this down. And as I said, you can go, if you guys go to mockup3d.com right here, you guys can take a look at the demo. The demo is free to use, and I would love to hear your feedback on it. You just go right here to mockup3d.com/demo or mockup3d.com and then enter your email. So yeah, so thank you, have a good one, and enjoy Blender.